Imagine your reader opening chapter 1 of your dissertation and silently asking two questions. What's wrong here? And why does this study need to exist? Your research problem is where you answer both of those at once. It is the intellectual doorway into your study. A lot of people confuse the research problem with a topic. AI in classrooms, teacher burnout, professional development, new teacher retention, those are topics. They are areas of interest. A research problem is more specific and more demanding. It is attention. It is something real that is happening in schools, districts, or systems, but it is not fully working, not fully understood, or not fully explained. Your job is to name that tension and show why it matters beyond your immediate context. You can think of a research problem as having 3 layers. The first layer is the phenomenon, what is actually happening that we can observe, document, or measure. The second layer is the tension, what, within that phenomenon, is not working, misaligned, or underexamined. The third layer is the consequence. What happens if we leave that tension unresolved, and why that matters for students, educators, institutions, or society. A simple way to draft a first version is to use a sentence frame like this. Population are affected by specific issue, but what is unresolved or not well understood? This matters because broader consequence or system-level implication. That frame forces you to identify who is involved, what the issue is, what we don't yet know, and why anyone outside your school or district should care. Here is what it sounds like when you fill it in. Undergraduate students in online science courses often struggle with motivation and engagement, but little is known about how course design features influence their sense of agency in learning. This matters because low engagement and reduced agency can contribute to higher dropout rates and limit long-term participation in STEM pathways. The phenomenon is their students struggling with engagement. The tension is their unclear impact of course design on agency, and the consequence is their risks to persistence and participation in STEM at a larger scale. Instead of only showing strong versions, it helps to walk through weak ones and deliberately revise them. Take this weak example. This study explores AI in classrooms because it's a trending topic that interests many educators. On the surface, it looks like an introduction, but as a research problem it fails. It doesn't specify what is actually happening with AI. It doesn't name any gap in understanding. It doesn't say what is at stake if we ignore it. To revise it, start with the phenomenon. Make it concrete. Many school districts are integrating AI-powered writing tools into literacy instruction. Now there is a real practice on the table. Next, surface the tension. Little is known about how these tools influence students' writing processes and revision habits. That tells us something important is not yet understood. Finally, push into the so what. Unchecked implementation may undermine essential writing skill development and widen existing gaps in academic preparedness. When you put those 3 moves together, the problem becomes: many school districts are integrating AI-powered writing tools into literacy instruction, but little is known about how these tools influence students' writing processes and revision habits. Unchecked implementation may undermine essential writing skill development and widen existing gaps in academic preparedness. This matters because unchecked implementation may undermine essential writing skill development and widen existing gaps in academic preparedness. Now, the study is not just about a trending topic. It is anchored in a concrete phenomenon, a clear conceptual tension, and a system-level consequence. Consider a second weak example. Teachers are tired and overwhelmed since COVID-19. This is emotionally true, but as a research problem it is too broad and too flat. It doesn't tell us what we are actually going to study. It doesn't connect to any particular institutional practices or decisions. It doesn't explain what is at stake beyond individual experiences of exhaustion. To revise it, narrow and layer. First, specify the phenomenon. Teacher burnout has increased in the years following the COVID-19 pandemic. Then introduce attention. School systems have implemented wellness and retention initiatives in response, yet educator attrition remains high, particularly in under-resourced districts. Now we have a disconnect between what systems are doing and what is actually happening. Finally, Articulate the consequence. Ongoing attrition disrupts staffing stability, weakens instructional continuity, and threatens long-term student achievement. The revised problem might read: teacher burnout has increased in the years following the COVID-19 pandemic. School systems have implemented wellness and retention initiatives in response, yet educator attrition remains high, particularly in under-resourced districts. Ongoing attrition disrupts staffing stability, weakens instructional continuity, and threatens long-term student achievement. This suggests a misalignment between policy interventions and teachers' lived experience of support. This matters because ongoing attrition disrupts staffing stability, weakens instructional continuity, and threatens long-term student achievement. Here the phenomenon is clear, the tension is explicit, and the consequence is unmistakable. You can also hear institutional practices and policies in the background: wellness initiatives, retention efforts, staffing patterns. In each of these revisions, there is one more subtle move happening. The problem is connected to larger structures, not just individual experiences. You can hear districts, initiatives, policies, funding priorities, and long-term outcomes sitting behind the sentences. That is important. A strong research problem is not just teachers feel X or students experience Y. It is this is happening inside particular systems, under particular policies or practices, and there is a mismatch between intention and reality. Another layer you can add, even briefly, is a hint at the conceptual lens you will use. If you are writing about burnout and leader response, you might be stepping into conversations about organizational support or working conditions. If you are writing about AI and writing, you might be stepping into conversations about learning processes and autonomy. At the research problem stage, you don't need to unpack a full theoretical framework, but you can signal that there is a conceptual toolkit that will help you interrogate the tension you just named. It is also useful to think about audiences and beneficiaries, not only harms. When you write, this matters because you can follow that with one more idea: who stands to benefit if this problem is better understood? It might be classroom teachers, building leaders, district administrators, students, or policymakers. A single sentence like clarifying this problem can inform district leaders and teacher educators as they refine support structures and professional learning models, connects your study to real decision makers, and makes the significance of your work visible. Now there is a practical question you should always ask yourself as you reread your research problem. If nothing changes, so what? If this pattern persists for the next 5 or 10 years, what happens to students, to staff, to communities, to resource use? Which systems are impacted? Staffing, funding, curriculum, policy, accountability. Why should someone who does not know you and does not work in your context still care about this issue? And on the other side, if we understand this better, who gets helped and how? Those so what questions are not extra. They are the heart of the research problem. There is one more dimension that often gets overlooked: alignment with your eventual method. The way you frame your problem should already hint at the kind of knowledge you are trying to produce. If your study will be quantitative, your problem can lean toward patterns, relationships, predictors, or outcomes, things that can be tested and modeled. If your study will be qualitative, it should emphasize experience, meaning, process, or understanding in context. If you are using a mixed methods design, your problem can hold both a pattern that needs to be measured and an experience or process that needs to be interpreted in order to explain that pattern. You do not need to name the method in the problem paragraph, but the kind of tension you describe should be consistent with the kind of answers your design can provide. Finally, your research problem needs to be anchored in evidence, not just observation. When you say that districts are investing heavily in technology-related professional development, that burnout has risen, that AI tool adoption is accelerating, or that transfer from training to practice is inconsistent, those are claims that can and should be supported with citations. You don't need a long list of sources in this paragraph, but 3 to 5 well-chosen references can show that the phenomenon is real, that the tension has been noticed, and that the consequences you name are plausible. Without citations, your problem reads as opinion. With citations, it becomes an evidence-based justification for inquiry. So as you shape your research problem, look for these elements working together. You clearly identify a concrete phenomenon. You surface a conceptual tension. You make the so what or consequence explicit by pointing to system-level or societal consequences, and by naming who is affected and who might benefit from better understanding. You hint at the structures and concepts surrounding the problem, practices, policies, resource patterns, or theoretical ideas. You frame it in a way that aligns with the kind of study you plan to conduct. And you tie your claims to at least a small foundation of existing evidence. When all of that is present, your research problem stops being "here is my topic" and becomes "here is the puzzle my study is designed to help solve." That is the level of clarity and significance you are aiming for before you ever move on to the purpose statement or the research questions.